stage at CPAC with a chainsaw, making fun of firing federal workers who make $50,000 a year.
In an interconnected global economy.
What is your job exactly? I mean, seriously, besides yelling at your laptop, what is it that you do for a living? What do you write on your tax return, son?
Trade relations between powerful economies are of critical importance.
War is heating up. The Canadian province of Ontario says it will slap a 25% surcharge on electricity exported to the U.S. Let's go to CBS News correspondent Chanel Call. Chanel, great to see you.
The intricate web of global commerce links nations in mutual dependence, where the trade practices of a few countries can reverberate throughout the world. Among the key players in this global system are the United States, U.S., and the European Union, EU, two of the largest economic powers on the planet. Historically, the US and EU have maintained strong economic ties, marked by mutual growth and prosperity. However, in recent years, their relationship has been strained by differing economic policies and trade practices, leading to escalating tensions that have now reached their zenith. The ongoing trade war between the European Union and the United States has been brewing for several years, but it is in 2025 that the conflict has truly come to the forefront. What began as a series of tariff impositions under the administration of President Donald Trump has evolved into a full-scale trade war that risks destabilizing not only the transatlantic economy but the global economy as a whole. This essay seeks to provide a comprehensive analysis of the current trade war, exploring its causes, the key sectors affected, the political and economic implications for both the EU and the US, and potential global consequences. The rivalry between the US and the EU is not a new phenomenon. In fact, for the past 2 decades, there has been ongoing friction between these two economic giants, particularly in areas such as agriculture, digital trade, and industrial policies. Yet, it is the recent imposition of tariffs on key sectors, particularly steel, aluminum, and automobiles, that has escalated tensions to a breaking point. In March 2025, the European Commission issued a statement warning of severe retaliatory actions in response to the US's protectionist measures. These actions have set the stage for what could become one of the fiercest trade confrontations in modern history. The prelude to the trade war, the role of Trump protectionist policies, The roots of the current trade war can be traced back to the economic policies implemented during Donald Trump's first term as president. Under the banner of America First, Trump's administration implemented a range of protectionist policies that aimed to reduce the U.S. trade deficit and revive domestic manufacturing. One of the most significant and controversial moves was the imposition of tariffs on imported steel and aluminum. These tariffs, which were justified by the U.S. government as a national security measure, were designed to protect American industries from foreign competition. The decision to impose tariffs on steel and aluminum imports had immediate and far-reaching consequences, particularly for European exporters. For countries like Germany, France, and Italy, major steel and aluminum producers, access to the U.S. market was an important source of revenue. In 2024, European steel and aluminum exports to the U.S. were valued at approximately $40 billion. With the new tariffs in place, these European industries face significant challenges. The Trump administration's justification for the tariffs was the need to protect U.S. industries from unfair foreign competition, but many saw this as an attempt to shield American companies from market forces, particularly in industries where they were struggling to compete globally. As a result, the European Union began to prepare for retaliation. The EU has a long history of responding to trade barriers with countermeasures of its own, and it quickly moved to implement tariffs on American products. These tariffs targeted a range of goods, from agricultural products to consumer goods, in an attempt to force the U.S. to back down. However, as tensions continued to rise, it became clear that the EU would need to escalate its response to protect its economic interests. The European Commission's retaliation plan Phase 1 and beyond ***. In March 2025, the President of the European Commission announced a comprehensive retaliation plan that would involve the phases of tariff impositions. The first phase, worth $28 billion, would target a range of American products, including steel, aluminum, and automotive products. The second phase, worth $108 billion, would expand the scope of retaliation to include other critical sectors, such as pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, household appliances, and textiles. The European Commission's approach was clear. If the US continued to impose tariffs on key European exports, the EU would respond with its own tariffs in kind. The European Commission's retaliation plan was not only a response to the US tariffs, but also a signal to the Trump administration that Europe would not back down in the face of unilateral trade actions. On 1st April 2025, the US further escalated tensions by announcing that the new tariffs would take effect immediately. This move was seen as a direct challenge to the EU's economic interests and a clear indication that the US was prepared to intensify the trade war. In response, the President of the European Commission stated, "We have been preparing for this for a long time. We cannot accept unilateral impositions." This statement made it clear that the EU was committed to defending its economic interests, and it set the stage for what could become one of the most intense trade confrontations in recent years. The message was simple. The EU would not allow the US to dictate the terms of global trade, and it was prepared to take whatever steps necessary to protect its industries. The key sectors affected: steel, automobiles, pharmaceuticals, and technology ***. The EU's retaliation plan is centered around several key sectors that are critical to both the US and European economies. The first phase of retaliation, which involves $28 billion in tariffs, targets goods such as steel, aluminum, and automobiles. These sectors are particularly important because they represent some of the largest and most significant industries in both the US and the EU. The second phase of retaliation, which could involve up to $108 billion in tariffs, would expand the scope of retaliation to include other strategic areas such as pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, household appliances, and textiles. Steel and aluminum ***. The steel and aluminum industries have been at the center of the trade war between the US and the EU. In 2024, European exports of steel and aluminum to the US were valued at around $40 billion. These exports are crucial to the economies of countries like Germany, France, and Italy, where steel and aluminum production is a key part of the manufacturing sector. European producers had long benefited from relatively low tariffs on their exports to the US, but the imposition of tariffs by the Trump administration has forced these producers to reconsider their market strategies. If the US continues to impose tariffs on European steel and aluminum, the EU has indicated that it will respond with similar measures. The European Commission's plan to retaliate with tariffs on American steel and aluminum products sends a strong message to the US that Europe will not accept unfair trade practices. If these tariffs are imposed, it could lead to significant disruptions in the global supply chain, as the US and Europe are two of the largest producers and consumers of steel and aluminum in the world. Automobiles ***. The automotive sector is another area of intense competition between the US and the EU. In 2024, European exports of automobiles to the US were valued at $70 billion, making this one of the most important areas of trade between the two regions. The US market is a significant source of revenue for European car manufacturers, such as Germany's Volkswagen and BMW, as well as France's Renault and Peugeot. If the EU retaliates by imposing tariffs on US automobiles, it could lead to price increases for European car models in the US market, making them less competitive against American-made vehicles. The automotive sector is a major employer in Europe, with millions of jobs directly or indirectly tied to car manufacturing and sales. Any disruption in the trade of automobiles between the EU and the US could have severe consequences for the European economy. Additionally, the US automotive industry could also suffer if the EU imposes tariffs on American-made cars and automotive parts. This sector, which is already struggling to compete in the global market, could face even greater challenges if it loses access to the European market. Asterisk, asterisk, pharmaceuticals, asterisk, asterisk. The pharmaceutical industry is another area where the EU has significant leverage over the US. In 2024, EU exports of pharmaceuticals and medical devices to the US were valued at over $60 billion. Europe is home to some of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies, such as Germany's Bayer and Switzerland's Novartis, both of which rely heavily on the US market for their revenues. If the US imposes higher tariffs on European pharmaceuticals, it could lead to higher prices for American consumers and hospitals, potentially increasing healthcare costs across the US. On the other hand, the US pharmaceutical industry also relies on access to European markets. Major US pharmaceutical companies, such as Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson, depend on relatively low tariffs to export their products to Europe. If the EU retaliates by imposing tariffs on US pharmaceuticals, it could have a significant impact on these companies' profitability. The pharmaceutical sector is a critical part of both economies, and any disruptions could have far-reaching economic and public health consequences. Asterisk, asterisk, semiconductors and technology, asterisk, asterisk. In recent years, the technology sector has become an increasingly important area of competition between the US and the EU. Semiconductors, in particular, are a critical component of modern technology, and both the US and Europe are major producers of these high-tech components. European semiconductor manufacturers, such as those in the Netherlands and Germany, export tens of billions of dollars worth of semiconductors to the US each year. If the US imposes tariffs on these products, it could drive up prices for American technology companies, such as those based in Silicon Valley, which rely on European semiconductors for their products. Similarly, if the EU imposes tariffs on US digital technology products, it could harm the competitiveness of American technology companies in the European market. The technology sector is increasingly becoming a new front in the trade war, as both sides vie for dominance in a market that is critical to the future of the global economy. Asterisk, asterisk, the global economic impact, risks and consequences, asterisk, asterisk. The ongoing trade war between the US and the EU has significant implications not only for the two parties involved but for the global economy as a whole. As two of the largest economies in the world, the US and the EU are deeply interconnected, and any disruption in their trade relationship could have ripple effects across the globe. The imposition of tariffs on key sectors such as steel, automobiles, pharmaceuticals, and technology could lead to higher prices for consumers and businesses, potentially slowing down economic growth in both regions. Moreover, the trade war could create opportunities for other countries, particularly those in Asia, to strengthen their position in the global market. For example, Asian manufacturers could increase their market share by supplying goods that were previously provided by European or American producers. This could lead to a shift in global trade dynamics, with countries like China, Japan, and South Korea playing an increasingly important role in the global economy. The ongoing trade war also raises questions about the future of international trade agreements and global economic cooperation. If the US and the EU continue down the path of protectionism, it could signal the beginning of a new era of economic isolationism, where countries turn inward to protect their domestic industries. This would undermine decades of progress in international trade and cooperation, potentially leading to a fragmented global economy. Asterisk, asterisk, conclusion. Will diplomacy prevail or will the trade war widen? As tensions continue to escalate between the US and the EU, the future of their trade relationship remains uncertain. Both sides have shown a willingness to impose tariffs and retaliate against each other, and there is no clear sign that either side is ready to back down. The EU has made it clear that it will not accept the US's protectionist measures, while the Trump administration has vowed to press on with its tariffs as part of its broader economic agenda. The outcome of this trade war will have profound implications not just for the EU and the US, but for the global economy as a whole. As the two sides continue to clash over key sectors such as steel, automobiles, pharmaceuticals, and technology, it remains to be seen whether diplomacy will prevail or whether the conflict will escalate into a full-scale trade war. What is clear is that the world is watching closely, and the future of global trade hangs in the balance. As we await further developments, it is essential to consider the broader implications of this trade war. The global economy is interconnected, and the actions of major players like the EU and the US will have far-reaching consequences. Whether this conflict leads to a comprehensive trade agreement or further escalation remains to be seen, but the world will undoubtedly be watching closely as the situation evolves.